We call this strange Friday good. How can such a day as we read about in the Gospels be called good? Let's just make a quick list of what went on that day according to the Gospel of John. A man is betrayed by a close friend for money and arrested. There's a violent but ineffectual attempt at defense and an ear cut off. Another friend disavows his closest friendship out of fear 3 times. There's a rigged trial by the highest Jewish court to ensure the conviction of an innocent man. The beating of the same innocent man. Another trial by the highest political authority on trumped-up charges. The Roman governor makes his final judgment only to protect his own political interests. There's more beating of the innocent man and a lot of mocking. There are 2 legal systems working in tandem, one to condemn the man, the other to ensure his execution. An obviously guilty man is released in exchange for the blood of an innocent. More mocking. We see a mother and a few loyal friends grieving. There is a brutal, agonizing, torturous, slow execution intended to maximize pain and shame. The man utters some final words and breathes his final breath. The man's clothes are divided among the executioners. We see a thrust of a spear in the man's side, with lots of blood and other bodily fluids flowing out. There is a hurried burial of the body in a nearby tomb. The end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the good. But wait, for some it was a Good Friday after all. Caiaphas the high priest and the Sanhedrin prevented another brutal Roman crackdown on the crowds of Judeans gathered in Jerusalem for Passover. The Jerusalem police and Roman soldiers had a chance for a little action and brutality on an expendable person. The crowds got a bit of gruesome spectacle, then went on their way without trouble. The man's ridiculous claims about divinity and sovereignty were put on trial, deservedly mocked, and decisively terminated. Pilate did what he had to do to appease the crowds, neutralize the threat, and so survive to rule another day. Missions were accomplished. Measurable outcomes were achieved. At least in this little Judean corner of the Roman Empire, a troubled situation was stabilized, lives were saved, and order was restored. All told, not a bad day after all. A good way to end the week on a positive note. All told, your regular, average, more or less Good Friday in history, and not just back then. So whether this Friday is good or not, all depends. Is it a day of infamy, injustice, horror, torture, trauma, and death? Or is it a day when things carry on as they usually do, and decisions are made that, all things considered, leave the world and its structures intact, safe, and mostly peaceable and livable for the majority of us? I guess the answer is yes. It's both, simultaneously. It seems you can't have the one kind of day without the other. Bad for some, good for others. So it's just another Friday then. What makes it a good day for you or not? Is this Friday just another day in the life of the world? What would make it any different? How might this day and its events be seen as anything other than what goes on in history every day? A whole lot of betrayal, injustice, trauma, and killing, right up against, and at the same time as, a whole lot of trying to keep the world safe and livable, at least for some. Is there anything else going on at all that might tip the scales? Not just a bit, but absolutely, so that we might call this day in some final sense good. How would we know? The prophet Isaiah struggles with this question. We begin in the middle of the Isaiah reading and in the midst of life. What do we see in the middle? On first observation, notice that, observation, the straightforward act of looking at. On first observation, again, we see only horror. We see a figure of marred and startling appearance, a figure whose awful, even disgusting appearance shocks the nations and their kings into silence. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness, so he will startle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. To look upon this figure is no easy thing. It's a lot easier to turn away from such an ugly sight, and so we do. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering and acquainted with infirmity. And as one from whom others hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him of no account. He looked so marred, ugly, diseased, and sickly that we can only come to one conclusion about him. Even God despises him. We accounted him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. After all, anyone accepted by God, blessed by God, affirmed by God, cannot look like this one. Punished, pierced, bruised, afflicted, oppressed, cut off from the land of the living. By all accounts, he ends up where he belongs. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. So why are we dealing with this figure at all? Why not ignore him? Why does the prophet Isaiah fixate on this one, whom everyone is revolted by, from whom everyone turns away? Who is he, anyway? Maybe this figure is the people Israel, in its existence as a nation among the nations. By all accounts, except maybe its own, Israel was never much to look at. A tiny tract of land, inhabited by a ragtag bunch of tribes, calling itself a nation, establishing a monarchy, and maybe for a brief moment, achieving some kind of success that might even look like a minor empire. But never much to see here in the big scheme. A bit of a joke, really, compared to Egypt, or Assyria, or Babylon, or later Greece and Rome. And now, when the prophet is writing, Israel is nothing at all. A conquered, decimated, disfigured, stricken, despised, and rejected nation of misery, stripped from its land and exiled in a foreign empire. If you're looking for anything like a prosperous nation, why would you look here, especially if you're an Israelite? Turn aside. It's pitiful. It's ugly. It's a shame and an embarrassment. The life and times and conquests of real nations and empires goes on. For them, the world is a good place, in which they do good things and secure a good life for themselves. Look away from the marred and clearly God-forsaken figure of Israel. It was always a nation too weak and too small and vulnerable to be destined for a place in history. Forget about Israel. Or maybe the figure is the prophet. When God called him, back in Isaiah chapter 40, and said to him, "Comfort, O comfort my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem." Did any Judean in Babylon listen? There was no more nation or king of Israel to listen to the prophet, just a conquered, worn out, and dispersed dry bones of a people, now just surviving in exile. "Here is your God," the prophet says, "your God whose mighty arm will rescue you and gather his people again." Did anyone listen? Or was the prophet himself a joke, preaching a fantasy, wild-eyed, weak and sickly, despicable and stricken, struck down by God? Who would look to him and listen to him for any good news when he himself, by all appearances, was God-forsaken? There's nothing to see here. Just turn away. Forget about the prophet. Or maybe the figure is the one whose final hours we described right at the start. The one for whom, by all objective accounts, this Friday was not a good day. The one from whom, like Israel and the prophet, it is best to turn away in horror and disgust. History is not going in his direction. The kings and the nations and the rich have moved on. They make their own Fridays good, or at least as good as they can be, which is why they turn away from this one whom, in any case, they have taken out of the city and executed. Turn away. Forget about this man. So why are we still looking at this one? At this conquered people Israel, at this crazy prophet Isaiah, at this horribly mutilated Yeshua on a Roman cross? At any of those despised and rejected and God-forsaken figures whom history has cast aside, turned away from, forgotten? Why are we still looking where no king or nation or power elite wants to look? Where we don't really want to look either, if we're honest. I, want to turn away from these miserable and despicable losers. How can God be there in that unambiguously bad Friday, that God-forsaken Friday of the defeated, disfigured, and forgotten? Isaiah asks this question: who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? If we call this Friday good, who will believe it? It flies in the face of every cold, hard reality. And if we say that somehow this Friday is nevertheless God Friday, who will believe us? Everything about this day contradicts the arm of the Lord, which should look like power and deliverance. This God-forsaken Friday, with its God-forsaken Israel, and its God-forsaken prophet, and its God-forsaken Messiah pretender, have nothing to show us. Every look, every gaze, if we can stand to look and gaze, says, let's turn away, because there's nothing of God and good to see here. Can this Friday be saved? We instinctively, naturally know where to look for God and the good. After all, the good life isn't hard to define. Peace, security, stability, prosperity, all the powers and systems working well to keep order and enable us to flourish with as little difficulty and distress as possible. It's what Caiaphas and Pilate were able to secure for Jerusalem and the Judean people. Even if one man had to die to save the nation, as Caiaphas wisely argued. And even if the political situation had to be stabilized with a bit of unjust violence, as Pilate wisely determined. The greater good for the greater number. The ugly crucifixion of the Messiah pretender was simply the price to pay for this to be a Good Friday. To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? And how has the arm of the Lord been revealed? That's the fundamental question. Because except for a revelation, an apocalypse, a word, an act absolutely from beyond history, there is no reason at all to keep looking at Israel and the prophet and the supposed Messiah on the cross. History comes to its own usual finale on the cross. This is how history works every Friday, with the evil that must be done to preserve the good. Whatever meaning history has in itself, from within its own movement and power and so-called progress, is given there in the betrayal, abandonment, and absurd but legal torture and crucifixion of an innocent man. Even though he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth, all this had to be done in order that life as we know it can go on. Can history mean anything else? Maybe. But only if it is framed from absolutely beyond history and given its meaning from there. And only if history's utmost failure is the place where we learn to discern the arm of the Lord. Because it's there in that place that God chooses to reveal his mighty arm. The mighty arm which, in the objective gaze, we see only as corrupt, despicable, punishing. The mighty arm that looks to us like the God-forsaken. Can we see this, God's mighty arm, on this day of all days? May God give us the eyes to see, because otherwise the only thing to do is turn away. Look, behold, says God, behold, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up, and shall be very high. Okay, maybe later, after the horror. But no. In Isaiah, just as in the Gospel of John, we get the absolute conjunction, the absolute simultaneity of being lifted up as both the lifting up of Jesus on the brutal and shameful cross and the lifting up, which is God's absolute glorification of his chosen servant and the salvation of history. Don't turn away. Look, behold, here it is. This is where the mighty arm of the Lord is revealed. Not where everyone is trying to save the world for another day. Here, where that world is brought to an end for its own good. Why do we keep looking at this sight of total abjection? Not because we are able on our own to see anything here, but foolishness and failure, tragedy and trauma. No, it's because the Lord reveals and enacts here another way of making history, another way of knowing the meaning of good, another way of a truly human life. It's called trust. It's called obedience. It's called self-offering. It's called absorbing the horrors of history into the real divine history-altering death of this one and only just human being who ever lived. And we know this because God has revealed it to be so. Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? God reveals. God apocalypses. God utters his history-altering word into history from beyond history, into our lives from beyond death. This apocalypse, this revelation, this word makes us able to see in the horror of this Friday the reality of divine goodness, the reality of a truly just human one, absorbing into himself the violence and death of history. We see God opening up in and beyond this horror, something we can in fact look at, but not from afar, not from the gaze that comes instinctively and naturally to us, not from the perspective of strategic calculations about our own safety, stability, and political interest. Where is the truth of this horror? Where is its goodness? There it is, within the horror, in the figure of the one so brutally disfigured. And we know this because God has revealed its truth and goodness to us and taken us into it. Who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? To us. And so by God's grace and revelation, we receive the strength to look, to see within the horror the one and only possibility of our own truth and goodness. By a perversion of justice, the just one was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? Surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. Yet we accounted him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole, and by his bruises we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have all turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. The just one, my servant, shall make many just, and he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured himself out to death, and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. Is this Friday just one more horror of history that we can't but turn away from? Is it just one more revolting spectacle of injustice and cruelty that we can't help but watch voyeuristically from the safety and comfort of our easy chair and then move on? Or is it here, just here, on this Friday, that the arm of the Lord has been revealed? Is this the Friday that changes everything? And is it therefore truly, unambiguously, Good Friday? Only an apocalypse will give us an answer.